Red Sea, he wound up going north. He passed through Jerusalem and Damascus on his way. This is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. You're probably familiar with that. This is another illustration from the Mohammed. Again, a famous fictional book from the Middle Ages. This illustration was made about 100 years before Ibn Battuta's travel. But it shows a caravan of pilgrims. They're beating big kettle drums on top of camels, celebrating their trip to Mecca. So finally, at the end of that long, arduous series of travels, he did reach Mecca. That's the Kaaba, of course, in Mecca, and completed his first pilgrimage. He continued on his journeys. I won't go into great detail over all these. The next one was he went to Iraq and Iran, and then returned to Mecca again. This area had been devastated by the Mongols a century before, and he saw a lot of remnants of that. But since then it had been taken over by, well, the Mongols had converted, and this particular group of Mongols that controlled Iran and Iraq were called the Ilkhanis, and the Ilkhan was their ruler. The last of the Ilkhans, who Ibn Battuta met, in fact he was feasted by, he was hosted by, was named Abu Sa'id, and he had not only converted to Islam but had completely assimilated. Ibn Battuta was very pleased to note that he didn't drink, for example. A lot of Mongols continued to drink after converting to Islam. And, if you know the Mongols, well, nobody was going to tell them to stop, really. Scary. So, you could look askance at it and go tut-tut, but there wasn't much you could do about it. But Mr. Abu Sa'id had done this, and he completely learned Persian. He was completely Persianized and so on. Let's see, I have a couple pictures. This is a 14th century manuscript showing what, in fact, Mongol warriors of the period looked like. They dressed kind of like that. That's a siege of some sort. Actually, I don't know what it's from a history by a fellow named Rashid Din. I don't know what siege that is. This is an ill-handed mosque, a city called Sultaniya. They were building a lot of Islamic monuments too. That's one of the first things you do when you're a Mongol and you convert to Islam, is you build a mosque to show. So then Mr. Ibn Battuta returned to Mecca. And there's kind of a theme here. He kept returning over and over, performing the pilgrimage again and again. In between pilgrimages, he would travel around. He'd take a little trip. The next trip was to the Red Sea, to Yemen, and down the coast of East Africa, back up to Oman, and then returning to Mecca once again. Along the way, he actually got to see his first Christian country, which was Ethiopia. He wasn't very impressed. They didn't offer him a lot of hospitality. He went further down the coast. He wound up Gulf of Oman. That's a dhow, sort of the traditional type of sailing ship of the Gulf of Oman. He also got to see pearl diving, things like this. Up until this point, he had been kind of warming up, but his next trip, he became far more ambitious. This is the first part of the trip, and it gets really confusing. First, he went up to Anatolia, which is what is now Turkey, crossed the Black Sea, went up the Volga River, following with another group of Mongols who had converted to Islam called the Golden Horde. Kind of frightening name. We get our word horde in English from a Mongol word ordu, which means army, actually. But it kind of conjures up images of lots of barbarians on horseback, burning down their cities. He crossed all the way back around the Black Sea, met up with yet another Mongol ruler from a group called the Chagatai Khanate. So three separate huge empires which had been formed by former Mongols, all of whom had converted to Islam. After that he traveled to Constantinople, which was another Christian kingdom, the Byzantine Empire. So his second non-Muslim state. There he met the Emperor Andronicus III. He moved in powerful circles. He liked to meet the local kings and exactly how he managed that. I've never quite understood how you just walk into a city, you're just some guy from Tangiers, and wind up meeting the king or the emperor. But somehow he did it. Must have been a very persuasive guy. This is in Constantinople. He saw the Hagia Sophia, which was then a major church. Then got after Constantinople was eventually conquered by the Turks and turned into Istanbul. The Hagia Sophia got turned into a mosque, but that is it. Nowadays, it's a mosque. It's a museum. Into a museum? I believe it's actually a functioning mosque, though. It has a mihrab and everything. And they put on, they sort of tacked on the minarets. They figured, it was a church, and they decided, you want to make it into a mosque, you put on some minarets on the outside. That kind of takes care of that. So then he made his biggest journey of all. He decided to go all the way to India to look for a job. So he traveled all the way through Central Asia down through Afghanistan to Delhi. Now, India still had, even the portions of India that were now controlled by Muslims still had a Hindu majority. There was a Muslim sort of elite that ruled over them, mostly of Turkish origin, but still a Hindu majority. And at this time, the Sultan of Delhi, whose name was Topul, was busy recruiting specialists from the Middle East. He didn't really have much of a labor pool for administration and so on. He needed more Muslims, especially experienced Muslims with training in Islamic law, people who were administrators, courtiers, and so on. And he got them from the Middle East, so there was an active kind of recruitment program going on. And this is where Ibn Battuta got his big break. He stayed there for 8 years working as a qadi, as a judge. However, Topulov was an unpredictable and somewhat paranoid ruler, constantly afraid of coup d'etats and unrest. And so he wasn't a great boss. There was always the danger that you would get executed if you were just for associating with the wrong people. So after 8 years, he had enough. At that point, he went on one last massive journey. This is the Minar built by Topulov. It wasn't until very recently the tallest minaret in the world. And now with modern architecture, there are bigger, but I think it's still one of the top 3 or 4. But in pre-modern times, the biggest minaret in the world. Topulov, again, wanted to make it clear to everyone that Delhi was an Islamic state now. The final journey, okay, now if this looks really squiggly and confusing to you, it is. Mr. Topulov asked Ibn Battuta to be his ambassador to China. That plan didn't work out. The fleet that he was supposed to travel with actually got destroyed mostly by a storm while still in port. And Ibn Battuta, knowing that Topulov had a temper, and didn't really feel like going back to Delhi to tell him the bad news. So he skedaddled, he ran. And then he traveled to all sorts of different places on his trying to make his way to China. He wound up in the Maldives, the Maldive Islands here, which had only recently converted to Islam. And again, he got a job as a qadi, as a judge. He went to all sorts of different places. He went to Sri Lanka. You can see there's just sort of, I mean, it's kind of hard to even tell from the map. There's this little spiral he makes. To all sorts of places, but eventually made his way to China, where the Mongol rulers encouraged trade, so there were a lot of Muslim trading communities in the major cities along the coast. It's unclear whether he actually made it to Beijing. There's a certain amount of debate over that. Some people think that he may have fudged it in his accounts, that maybe he didn't make it all the way. He just reported what other travelers had told him. But at any rate, it's pretty clear that he did make it to China. And it was in China that he suffered his greatest culture shock. Because all the people around him were eating pork, there were idols everywhere, it really was a difficult thing for him.